Hey Star Trek fans, Dan Gunther here. We're nearly at the end of our coverage of all of the information that came out of the San Diego Comic-Con for Star Trek coming up on television. Now, the final iteration of Star Trek that I'm going to talk about is the upcoming animated Star Trek series, Star Trek Lower Decks, by Rick and Morty writer Mike McMahon. This was almost a blank slate coming into Comic-Con. We knew that it was animated, we knew that it involved characters aboard an unimportant ship, and that they were kind of not the command crew, but lower decks characters on that ship. But beyond that, we didn't really know anything. And at Comic-Con, it was a lot of fun to get some insight into what this series is going to look like, and especially the character design and the style of the show. So without further ado, let's take a look at Lower Decks. On stage at the San Diego Comic-Con, executive producers Alex Kurtzman and Heather Caden were joined on stage by Tawny Newsome, Jack Quaid, and Jerry O'Connell, who are all cast members of the upcoming Lower Decks show. Jerry O'Connell served as moderator for the panel. Series creator Mike McMahon gave kind of a general synopsis of the series. He said, "Lower Decks is a half-hour animated show, so it feels about the same length as a Simpsons episode. It focuses on 4 ensigns who are serving on a not important ship in Starfleet, and they have stories that I think feel very Starfleet. They are stories about working on a ship and who they are working with. They are social and emotional stories mixed with sci-fi stories, because every Star Trek is about a family, and our show is also about a family. It is just not the same kind of family you have seen before. It takes place in 2380, right after Star Trek Nemesis. I am a TNG guy." So interesting that we get a firm placement of where it takes place in Star Trek history. With this in mind, it seems that the events of the show will be a part of Star Trek canon. For better or for worse, I personally think that's a good choice. I like that the stories will matter and have some sort of import in the Star Trek universe. McMahon also explained his approach to the show and how it would focus on B stories rather than the traditional type of Star Trek stories. For me in TNG, I was there for the B stories. You know, Riker is trapped on a planet with his transporter clone. Great, I love that. But Data and Geordi are writing a play and getting into a fight about it? That is what I want. I love that stuff. And to write a show that is primarily the kind of social stories on the ship that also has sci-fi and a comedy at the same time. Animation helps it bridge from the first frame that is like, oh, this is what I love. But it is focusing and heightening a thing that I always knew was there, but wasn't always the main thing in the show. He went on to explain that the show is made from a love of Star Trek, and that there is no intention to mock Star Trek or to make fun of it, but rather to have just a little bit of fun within that universe. One of my favorite bits is how he talks about how the humor has different levels and may play to different members of the audience depending on their association with Star Trek. It's funny enough and it's clear enough that if you have never seen Star Trek before, this can be your first Star Trek, and then be like, I guess there's some live action Star Trek too. But if you love Star Trek, it is in a shared universe, so there are jokes and jokes that you guys will get about, like, Odo's bucket. You don't need to know Odo and his bucket for you to believe that the characters on the show know about it. We also got introduced to the 4 main characters of the show, and these seem like an interesting group of people, as well as the voice actors who portray them. The first is Tawny Newsome as Ensign Mariner, and she describes the character like this. "She is what I think I am in my head all the time. She is always very irreverent and a badass and doesn't follow the rules. I am actually a speed limit driving total wimp. She is very good at all things Starfleet, she just doesn't care. She has been demoted a ton of times. She should be way further in the ranks than she is. She is just kind of like a weirdo rock and roll party queen who just wants to ride her skateboard and eat her piece of pizza in peace, man." Then we have Jack Quaid as Ensign Brad Boimler. I play Ensign Brad Boimler, and that expression on the character preview says it all. He is basically the opposite of Mariner. He is very by the book. He really wants to be a captain. He is very book smart, but constantly getting in his own way. He gets very in his head. I always say he would nail the written portion of the driving test with flying colors, but once it actually got to him being in the car, it would be a complete and total disaster. And these two, they clash. Boimler is very pearl clutchy. Ensign ND is voiced by Noelle Wells, who is not at the panel, but Mike McMahon described her thusly. It's her first day on the ship in the pilot, so we are going to explore this new niche of the Star Trek world through her eyes. She was a huge Starfleet fan even through Starfleet Academy, so being on the ship every day just blows her mind. There is no job that she won't do. She is in the medical bay, and there is no gross alien illness that she is not just absolutely thrilled to be dealing with. She's kind of like if I got to be on a Star Trek ship and I would be like, yeah, whatever, I will deal with anything, I just want to be here. That is what Tendi is like. She is also hilarious and just a source of joy. Eugene Cordero voices Ensign Rutherford, who was also not at the panel, and Mike McMahon described the character like this. He is our engineer. Like Geordi LaForge, he is amazing at engineering stuff. But unlike Geordi LaForge, he does not solve the problems by the end of every episode, because he is learning, and sometimes science is about learning stuff and making mistakes. He has this cyborg implant on his head that he just got, and it's like when you get a new phone and they got rid of the button. Do I swipe now? But that's how he thinks. He is a TNG early adopter. We also learned a bit about the setting for the show. It's set aboard a starship called the USS Saratoga, which is a California-class starship. We didn't get a chance to see the ship exterior yet. Hopefully that will be coming. I'm always excited about starships and technology and stuff like that, so I'm really excited to get a look at this ship once we finally do get the chance. Even though the show is focused on the lower decks ensigns that we talked about earlier, there is also a command crew, and they're kind of described as thinking the show is about them, but it really isn't. And Mike McMahon outlined the command crew of the Cerritus as well. We have Lieutenant Shaxus, voiced by Fred Tatasciore, a big muscly Bajoran who wants to eject the warp core all the time. We have Don Lewis as Captain Freeman, who is a stoic, ethically bound classic Starfleet captain. And then we got Commander Jack Ransom, who is sort of a hunky guy, played by this goofball, and he indicates Jerry O'Connell. He is kind of like Riker if you gave him a little bit of speed and a little less shame. And then Gillian Vigman plays Dr. Tiana, who is a Cation. Dr. Tiana is our head of medical. She is really, really bad at talking to people, but really good at solving sci-fi space mysteries. We also got to look at the title design to Star Trek Lower Decks, and it's definitely not like anything we've seen before, very cartoony. I'm kind of digging the style. It feels kind of in the same vein as Rick and Morty, not quite so off the wall, but still just a little bit on that absurdist side. So this isn't what I was expecting look-wise, but I am pleasantly surprised. I think this could be a lot of fun. This is a show that I'm not going to take too seriously and become maybe the most invested in, but it does look like it will be a nice little piece of Star Trek for people who really enjoy the comedic side of things. And that is me from time to time, so I think I will be really enjoying this show. So how about you guys out there? What do you guys think of what we learned about Lower Decks? Will you be watching when it premieres? And we don't have a premiere date yet. They are working on it. We'll bring you that news as soon as we're able to. But yeah, I want to hear from you. How likely are you to tune in and check this out? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching, and thanks especially, of course, to the Patreon supporters for their help in bringing these videos to you. And that's it. That wraps up our SDCC Star Trek news coverage. Thank you so much for watching these videos. I'm pooped. I haven't done 4 videos 4 days in a row ever before on this channel. So thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. I'll see you all in the next video. And until then, as always, live long and prosper.